Welcome to Creative Labs by Alchemy, a podcast from alchemymerch.com that explores the lives of creators and their experiences bringing their art to the marketplace. Hosted by Greg Kerr.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Creative Labs. I'm your host, Greg, and today I'm here with Daniel Quasar, who is the creator of the Progress Pride flag. If you've seen the flag with the chevrons all over it, that is him. I just said him. See, I already messed up. It's they. I knew this was going to happen. See, Daniel and I talk all the time on the phone, and even before we started, I said, what pronoun do you go by? And Daniel said, they, them. And I just said he, so I already caught myself in a mistake there. So how about welcome, Daniel?
That works too. Hi.
Hey, so I want to talk to you. I mean, in 2018, was it 2018 you came up and created the Progress Pride flag. And it's really the first redesign of the flag, since Gilbert Baker's, right?
No, not really. Philadelphia had theirs in 2017, so with the two stripes on the top.
Well, I mean, in the sense of they take Gilbert Baker's and then, there's some other color. I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody, but they added more stripes, other colors to represent more things. And yours is probably the first kind of redesign in a sense of taking the flag and adding in new design elements. So I was wondering.
Yeah, I guess you're right in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it. I talk to you, and I say this to you all the time. It's really strange, kind of being friends with somebody that designed something that's just become part of culture. I see this flag everywhere for the past, especially starting last year. See the flag. I think the first time I saw it pop up, kind of outside of your use, was Spotify. I mean, it's everywhere. Even today, I think I tagged you. Bob's Burgers did a post of some fan art, and the fan art they did of Bob's Burgers,
already bought some stuff from them too.
Nice. Was holding your flag, and it's just everywhere. And so I just kind of wanted to talk to you. I mean, that's such a crazy thing to happen. But in terms of what made you decide to even approach redesigning the flag or coming up with your own interpretation of a pride flag?
Well, I didn't really approach it per se. I kind of I had seen what Philadelphia and what Seattle had done with the flag. And I just was, it was one of those kind of moments where you're just like, I wasn't planning on doing this, but I instantly became inspired and just was like, why not? And I was up super late, and that's when I do all my magic anyways. So I just was like, hey, this sounds interesting. Why don't I give it a try?
And what was the inspiration for, was it the design where you're just playing around and felt like, hey, this is looking cool? Because it does add in that new element, and you've got the chevrons are there for a reason, right? And so what's the reason for those, or what are they trying to show?
Yeah, so it was definitely a tinkering kind of thing. That tends to be how I approach most of my work in design and art and anything else that I do is kind of I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I'm just going to play around a little bit until something, lands. And, which I mean is sort of true and sort of not. Obviously there is some purpose behind things being done. But for me, it was I knew what the message was of these other flags and what they were doing. And so I thought, what can I do aesthetically to add to or emphasize that messaging? And so that's what kind of jump-started the idea of let's rearrange the elements a little bit and see if we can create something. And when I landed on the chevron shape, which was actually the first one that I made, often the way that I do things is I'll make the one that is the one, and then I'll make like 15 other versions of it, and then I'll go, I don't like any of these, and then go back to the very first one again and be like, that was the one all along. And the idea of an arrow, a chevron that is pointing a direction away from where you're at is kind of a it's what inspired the name of progress, because it insinuates movement, and movement means change and stuff like that. So the chevron kind of instantly added this idea of progress and the need for progress. And so though I was tinkering with the design to create what I did, the messaging kind of flowed out of it at the same time as it was being made.
Right. And then, so, if we're looking at the history of the flags, right, we've got the original one was Gilbert Baker, and that one was done, the colors were all meant to represent something different, right? I think I saw you posted about it recently, but what were the colors initially meant to represent? Do you know the story of how that kind of came about?
I do, and I'm actually going to pull it up because I am a terrible person who doesn't remember. I like to talk about history and how important history is, and then I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Well, I don't want to peg you with something with that, but, like initially those different colors were meant to say, hey, this is representing this is representing that. Well, it life, healing, sunlight, nature, serenity, and spirit? Is that close?
Yeah, so there's actually, so it goes a little bit further, because Gilbert Baker actually did the 6-color traditional flag that we often see is not even the original.
Oh, okay.
To begin with. Like, when Gilbert Baker first made the flag in 1979, it was 8 colors, and so it had hot pink, which was sex, and then it had red, which was life, orange is healing, yellow was sunlight, green was nature, teal or turquoise was magic, blue was serenity, and violet was spirit. And at the time, hot pink was a really hard fabric to come by.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was difficult to come by. So they dropped that color in the manufacturing level, and then either the same year or the next year or soon after that, I don't remember exactly, but Harvey Milk was like, can you cut this down to 6 colors instead, because it will look better when it's, because they were planning on putting it on the street for parades and stuff, and the aesthetic of 6 stripes would have looked better lined up on the street, as well as whether it was sideways or vertical or whatever, it all would have looked better. I think there was something about how when it was placed vertically, the pole of the thing that was holding it up wouldn't block one of the colors if there were 6, but if there were 7, it would have. So they took out the turquoise, and that's how you have the 6-color flag that we all know and love today.
And then after that, the next kind of flag, major flag introduction was it Monica Helms doing with the trans non-binary flag, and was that 99 or so?
Yeah, so Monica Helms was in 1999, if I remember correctly, and that was the trans pride flag, and light blue for masculine-leaning trans people, light pink for feminine-leaning trans people, and white it was non-binary and non-conforming.
Okay, and I mean that was another big kind of new, we'll get into it later, but I'm always curious about it. I think it's interesting that there's kind of conflict sometimes within different queer communities of trans maybe not being accepted and everything. It's definitely something I wanna touch on or talk about, because I think there's a chance that for myself, maybe anybody watching, to learn, and then so after that, I guess the next things we kind of have added was it Amber Hikes does the Philly flag, and was that brown and black, or was that or the black was added for the HIV loss of people to HIV and AIDS?
There's a lot of other flags that were in and out of there. There was the bisexual flag, which I believe was in 2001, made by Michael Page, and um, and then in like 2014, 2015, there was a plethora of different flags made on Tumblr and online in different places to represent more sub communities, like the non-binary flag and just all sorts of different. I think the pansexual flag and a bunch of other ones of that nature were made around that time. I do know that the lesbian flag was also made in the early 2000s, I believe, or maybe it was closer to the 2010s. I don't remember exactly, which I feel terrible about. I should know my history better, but here we are. Um, but yeah, Amber Hikes introduced the More Color, More Pride Philadelphia Pride flag in 2017 through the Philadelphia City Council, as well as a bunch of activists who were involved in that around that time.
And then
And that was the black and brown stripes.
Right. And with that getting added in, and then when you made your flag, you took all these elements and were trying to represent, as many people as possible. And like you were talking about with the progress and with the chevrons, the arrows that are pointing forward, if I recall, the colors that are in there are trans, and the black and brown are the colors that are in there, or the ones for pushing forward on your flag. And so, saying with, we see a lot in the news, a lot of things happening that obviously trans people seem to be having one of the bigger fights right now for equal rights. And within the community, like I said, I've always found it a little bit strange, I guess, that maybe trans people would have more conflict within the queer community. I guess I just never really understood why that would be, honestly. But obviously it seems, from an outside perspective, that they really are having a real struggle right now for just getting equal rights. And it seems like all of the movements that have really been successful to some extent, that are moving forward, it all seems to me to be about rights, like that core human rights as a person, that we all need to be treated equal, whether that's the color of your skin or, your sexuality, whatever it is, that's the fight, and with that, and having the black and the brown in there too, with moving forward. So was that for you? Was that something that's just like, look, we need to focus on this. This is what we need to push forward. This is what we need to be like really thinking about. And I know the kind of name for it is a progress pride flag that it typically goes by, right? The one that you designed?
Yeah.
And so what was kind of pushing that, can you talk a little bit about that, of what we need, or what you think needs or can be done for people of color and for trans?
Yeah, one of my major motivations was that the suicide rate and even the murder rate of trans people, and mainly trans women of color, is exceptionally high. And it's often ignored by the mainstream media, because who cares about a trans woman getting murdered? Most of the time it's just a speck amongst everything else that goes on. But it's really important, like our movement, our civil rights movement of as queer people, was started by trans women of color back in the Stonewall riots, against the police, Marsha P. Johnson. And we often forget that, because the community lives in this paradigm of gay culture, and gay pride is all about the hyper masculine athletic, cis, white, gay, male archetype. And, for the longest time, people that are not that have said, I don't feel welcome here. And, when I get pushback about the flag that I made, and people will be like, oh, the traditional pride flag is inclusive of everyone. And I'm just like, how many friends do you have that are people of color? Have you talked to them recently? Because I'm sure most of them would probably tell you they don't feel included. and so it was imperative for me to emphasize what was being emphasized by these other iconic images, that we're forgetting who started this. We're also ignoring who is being hurt at an exceptional rate. And yes, we have our struggles as a queer community in general, but there are those within our own community who are having larger struggles, I like that trans women of color are the most murdered out of the community. No, I think that's terrible, and I think we should hyper focus on that and make the appropriate changes to make that not be a thing, And so my flag was kind of like a way of saying, hey, I'm going to make you uncomfortable by pointing this out, and I want you to talk about it. And then when you're done talking about it, I want you to do something about it.
And depictions of trans people of color in history and movie and films and TV and pop culture has always been in a very negative light, traditionally.
Always a tragedy.
Right.
Always a tragedy.
It's always the streetwalker or the whatever. It's always some sort of very negative depiction. And I hope, as there's more positive depictions within pop culture, that helps to maybe normalize or to help give people somebody to look up to and see, because when there is that singular, very limited amount of exposure for the general public, it seems, they build that association, and just think, oh yeah, well, that's what they're all this or they're all that, or, and I feel like we really need more people getting that positive representation and getting shown to say, yeah, I'm just like everybody else. Look, I'm an actor, actress, whatever it is, and doing a major role or whatever thing, or the lead in a movie. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be about, oh, look at me, I'm playing a role as this too, but just still coming through and showing look at me, I'm a normal person. I'm a good example, to help people have something to look forward to. And I think it's such a shame that there's been so many things, as people of color, of course, have dealt with that forever. Yeah. I think we even chatted a little bit on the phone about the thing before with Apu, on The Simpsons, and there were no positive representations necessarily of Indian men in American kind of pop culture, all these things. And that's sort of the same thing that was happening, is you constantly see these negative depictions and people build kind of a bias without realizing it, or start to think, well, that's how they all are, whatever. And so I'm glad that you're focusing on trying to push forward the things that really need attention with the flag. And you made it in 2018, and you make this design in your house, you're working on it, you come up and say, this is cool, I like it. Do you just start sharing it on social media saying, hey, I made this thing? And in the past 2 years, it's really seemed to have been embraced on a much larger scale and really accelerated. But what was that kind of journey of creation to, as it started to kind of gain acceptance?
Yeah, for me, it was just after I made it in the middle of the night, bouncing ideas off of a friend of mine who was up at the same time. I just posted it on my Facebook, had a explanation all about it, and I think I also posted it on my Instagram either at the same time or the next day. But I just remember waking up and my phone was going crazy, constantly going off every 3 seconds. I'm pretty sure my phone died like 3 times that day. Just from I didn't touch it; it just died because it kept buzzing all the time. Calling up a friend of mine in Arkansas, being like, I don't know what's going on, and I'm terrified. Like, what is this? And he's just like, calm down. You're going viral. Just turn off your phone and hang out.
So it went viral kind of off of that initial posting. People were just sharing it like crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Oh, yeah. Like when I woke up, it already had thousands of likes and shares and comments, and it just all over the place. Like it was so fast.
Did you feel like, because as an artist, there's a lot of people that may watch this, they're independent artists, which is what you are, and you make something. And of course, we all hope that one day it's going to get embraced in whatever way, whether that means we're selling it as a product or it gets used on something. But it's so rare that something actually enters into pop culture, into the lexicon. And, what was that feeling as you're seeing this thing that you create is just, even on day one, is, we all know you get 50 likes or something, and you're like, yes, all of a sudden it's just blowing out, right out of the gate, you're getting this response. And like, as an artist, what was that kind of feeling, or what was going through your head?
Well, the main thing going through my head was, please don't have a panic attack right now. I'm pretty sure that whole day was just one continuous panic attack. At this point, I am not even sure if I've stopped. I think I'm still having a panic attack from then. But like, people ask me how, like, even now, how I feel about how widespread it is. And I just tell them, I don't know. Like, excited, terrified. The easiest for me is I tell people, I'm sort of like apathetic towards it. It's more of like, I'm just riding the wave and letting it do what it's going to do. But also I'm really excited and really honored and proud and humbled. But like, I physically and mentally can't let too much, like, I can't put too much energy in feeling it, because like I need to make sure I stay level.
And no pun intended.
So I try to keep.
Was that sense of pride, in your creation?
Yeah.
It just comes through and you go, I don't know. I've never had anything that just skyrocketed like that before. And I've never had that kind of experience. The closest thing is maybe working with clients that we're excited to work with, that real sense of like being proud of something. I'm proud of the fact that we get to work with you, that I've gotten to meet you through, working and making pins and doing things along the way. And, I get like a contact buzz a little bit just from thinking like, I don't know, your name is already in the history books, and your name is already alongside of these people that are just, it's just wild to me. And you're such a humble guy.
It's wild to me too.
It's not like you're out there making, millions of dollars off of this flag and trying to become a big celebrity off of it, or, doing things like that. You're just like, you're an artist at the end of the day, and you created something and it just blew up. But I think people, when you have a reaction like that, is proof of the work and what went into it. I think a proof of doing something for the right reason, and people identifying with that. And with that initial response, was it mostly positive, or do you still get a lot of pushback, or what's been your experience on that side of it?
It's been, like, I would say it's often 99% positive. And, you know, the internet is an interesting thing where, like, I think that positive response is more than you see, because I think people are more inclined to be negative on the internet than they are to be positive on the internet. So when I get negative feedback or constructive feedback that is negatively toned or whatever, I see that for what it is. Like that is the finite amount of negativity it is. But I will get a positive response, and I'm like, I know that there's this amount of people being positive about it, but I know that there's more than that, because people are less inclined to say I love this than they are to say I hate this on the internet, you know?
Right.
So I just take all of it in stride, positive, negative, neutral, whatever. I try not to focus too hard on anything. Like if somebody's cool about it, I'm like, thanks. And if somebody is not cool about it, I'm like, thanks also. You know, like, thanks for spending the time to comment on this post, because now you've triggered the algorithm, so it still helps me out in some way.
Yeah.
You know,
You're like, somebody else is going to see it and then see that you're a jackass, you know, so good job for
Yeah,
posting
right,
that negative
exactly.
thing anyway. I always do that too. People sometimes on our ads or things put some weird negative comment, and what's the point? Like, we never were. What are you doing? What are you really accomplishing right now? If there was some constructive feedback, somebody message you and says, you know, I think you should have used, 485 for your red, or something stupid. You know what? There's a difference between constructive. I don't know if people contact you about design element of it. They're like, do you ever get anybody?
I do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Actual
People will
artists
be
or
like,
just
can you add this, or can you change this, or will you do a version of it with this instead? And I'm just like, thanks, but like, I'm not like, it's kind of like one of those things where I'm like, I did a thing, but I'm not open for questions right now. You know, like, I'm not taking any interviews at this time.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that, because obviously there's LGBTQ, and there's plus I don't know what it's at right now, but they keep on getting kind of letters and things added to it. And do you get people that are just saying, oh, it's not enough, it's not representing me, it's not representing this, it's not representing that? And I keep seeing, as people are exploring more and finding out and feeling like, oh, I don't feel like I fit into this box, then I identify as this, or I identify as non-binary, or something that traditionally is outside of what the original kind of, classifications, in a sense, that were made. And again, as somebody, it confuses me a little bit, honestly, with all the things that keep on getting added. Honestly, like I always feel like I'm behind on what's happening, or I'm gonna mislabel somebody or not include somebody. And so do you get a lot of people that are kind of hitting up like, why am I not included? Or
Yeah, I've gotten some responses from people being like, oh, where do I fit into this? Some people, like, I've had people be like, well, what about me as bisexual, or other parts of the community? Where are the lesbian flag colors in here? And I just try to tell them, like, I just made the thing that has its message, that it's a very particular message. It's not meant to exclude you. It's meant to say, hey, this important thing is important to look at. And like the making it a binaristic thing of like, because you're saying this, you're automatically not saying this. I'm just like, no, stop trying to put a binary on it. Like, I'm just trying to put focus on a certain thing, and it wasn't an intentional. Obviously, things, like people are gonna feel left out, and I'm sorry about that, but like, I really have this particular thing that I think is important to be focused on, and that's that's just what I tell them. I'm like, like, that's just how it is. Like, I'm not here to it's one of those things where I feel like sometimes I'm like, do you want me to tell you that you feel that you're excluded? Because I'm not going to.
Right. You're like, that wasn't ever my
like,
intention.
yeah,
Good.
and I realize that intent is not all of it, but whatever. Like, I did what I did, and I'm not going to. I'll stand by what I did. I'm not going to back down from it. I feel like the queer community is in this really interesting like flux period where we are gaining a lot more notoriety and a lot more traction and a lot more emphasis placed on us. And so it's a really interesting place where we're able to, like you talk about how we keep adding more letters and things to the acronym. I think we're in a place of flux where we can decide what our identity is, and we're kind of in the middle of that and what it all means, and we're kind of trying to figure that out. And I, honestly, like, that's great because the movement's not really that old. The movement, is decades old at this point. I mean, queer people have existed for thousands and thousands of years, but the idea of like the civil rights movement, it has not been super long. And so I think we're in a place of finding our own identity and how we want to be seen in the world. And I'm all for making it as confusing as possible because that's fine. Make as many people uncomfortable as you want. I will say, out of all the names that I've heard, my favorite is what I got off of TikTok, and it's referring to the queer community as the Alphabet Mafia. I mean, it's true, because if you mess with us, we will come after you, and we are like a mafia. Like, we will come after you.
We've already taken all the good colors. I mean, every color at this point, just about. And now they're out to take all the letters.
I mean, if you think about it, if we're really going to talk about colors, like, I don't know. I grew up and all the straight people I know were all talking about beige and taupes for everything. So I don't feel like we stole any colors from anyone. They just clearly weren't being used, and we just. Oh, I know. I'm totally an 80s baby and a 90s kid growing up in a house that was all brown everywhere. Yeah. So light tan, sand.
So you don't think that beige is ever going to get accepted? I hope it kind of doesn't, because beige is not one of my... I'm similar age, and I think beige has such a negative connotation unless the kids that are coming up take the power back of beige. Maybe they will. I don't know, but
the pendulum will always swing. It's how it works.
Well, I think it's interesting you're saying, the queer community in general is in flux, and I imagine I'm mixing up what is defined as queer now, but I always kind of assumed that queer was a more all-encompassing kind of a term. I imagine that, like I said, it's in flux, and people are really finding new definitions and saying and identifying in ways, and it keeps expanding, and maybe it'll come back to a place that seems definitely, I'm not coming up with the right word here. I don't want to say reasonable, but manageable in a sense, because the more complicated that it gets for people that are even outside of that, your cis people. I never really know where things are at or what the right thing to say is, and what is queer defined as at this point? Is that kind of defining something more specific than a overarching?
I mean, it depends. Like, obviously, the term queer, it was a slur, and it still is for some people, fully acknowledging that. But it also was reclaimed a long time ago. to be given more power back within our community. And I personally refer to the community as the queer community just because I like that term and it works for me, and it doesn't work for everybody, and that's fine. And not everybody wants to be considered queer, and there are even like people who identify in the different gender aspects who are not gay or lesbian or whatever, so they might not latch onto queer because
Right.
though they have some variation of gender identity, they're not necessarily they're heterosexual in that sense. If we can dive into that, but like I don't want to get too far into queer psychology because it's not really my strong suit. But yeah, to me it's an umbrella term, but it doesn't work for everyone, and that's why I say like we're in flux because we're still trying to find the right terminology that works for us. And it's all different all around the world too. Like America has its own version, and then like Europe has their own version of the acronym, and like different places do. Like it's there's so many people all like trying to figure out what it all means, and you talk about wanting it to reach something that's reasonable, and then I think like, well, can you bring order to chaos, or can you make something comfortable that's meant to be uncomfortable? Like there are people in the queer community who want to be subversive, like, and that's really where a lot of who we are as LGBTQIA plus people is from a culture that was subversive. It was out the left of norm, and there's a lot of power in there, and people like to sit in that space because they're like, I don't want to be reasonable. I don't want to sit inside with everyone else. I want to be outside of that, and I think that's amazing too on its own.
Well, I think in general in culture, there's people that, if you want to say going against the stream or outside the box, that there is a comfortable space to be in that. And yeah, I can understand, of course, anybody feeling like I don't want to be normal, this whatever considered whatever the norm is, and I don't want to fit into that. And
I certainly don't want to be normal.
Normal's and boring. I grew up. I don't know if I'm normal. I grew up as a punk rocker, kind of whatever, and was fighting. Had my fist waving in the air, fighting against whatever thing I thought I was fighting against at the time. And probably still exist slightly. Well, at least in Arizona, for sure, left of center, and yeah, so I can see that. I guess in a weird way, I don't know why I didn't think growing up queer was used as a slur, was used in a negative way. And I guess in my adult life, when a lot of this stuff has really become more of a regular thing or regular experience that we have, and it's part of everyday life, that I stopped viewing the term queer in any kind of negative way for so long that I guess in my head I kind of forgot that there would obviously be a lot of people that would say, no, I don't identify me with something that was looked at in a negative light. I guess in a weird way I just haven't viewed it seen it in that way, in my life in so long that I kind of forget about that a little bit, Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, and but I'm also excited to see younger kids or kids now, they still deal with obviously a lot of problems, a lot of bullying, a lot of things, but in general, it seems like I would say it's easier, but it's not such a big fight maybe to come out and say, I identify as this, and hearing teenagers and things. When I think of when I was in junior high or I was in high school or whatever, people weren't really coming out. People weren't open or even talking about it, really expressing that in any kind of way. And I imagine that was kind of similar when you were growing up. And now it doesn't seem like it has to be viewed as this negative thing in any way. I'm really excited to see that kids are feeling way more comfortable to even discuss what they're feeling, so that makes me feel so positive, like so happy to see that at least we are getting some progress. But
Yeah.
where, to you in your mind, like there's no end, of course, but like what does the progress, like what would you like to see in the near future kind of happen for, in general for the community?
No, I don't even know. I want to see a world where everyone is treated with equity and, like people minded their business more often. Like unless it's harming you, like who gives a fuck? Like unless something is actively hurting you, it's none of your business and you don't need to have an opinion on it, Like I feel like that's the problem, is that stemming from different things, whether it's religion or politics or whatever, people are like, that thing goes against what I believe, so I need to say something about it. When it's like, no, you could just do what you're doing and not say anything at all,
Right.
and you'll be just fine.
Well, what do you think about, because,
yeah.
we're dealing with, obviously during the Trump era, there was a villain to fight against, a very active villain for a lot of communities, most communities, in general. And
well, you can say a very visible villain,
right, very visible,
because the villains are still there. They're just hidden.
Yeah, but when you've when you've got something like that that's so visible in the news constantly, and there's this fight, it really energizes people all together. The Black Lives Movement, and you see more within the queer community, in general, coming up and fighting against that. And there's that person just to constantly fight against, and it energizes. And what happens in a time like now, where, like you said, they're more hidden maybe, but we're seeing some progress. Do you see kind of people not as engaged, or just on a more personal level? Like, what do you think people need to do to keep pushing forward actively, even though there's not this super villain that's president?
I think, honestly, I feel like a lot of people got energized by all of that, and I feel like it's still, and it has sustained, and it's still continuing. Like I feel like there's a lot more community engagement. Like people have seen what they're capable of doing when things are bad, and now that things are, less bad, or just bad in a different way, they know their power and what they're capable of doing, and they're gonna do it, and they are doing it. Like one of my favorite phrases is "be gay, do crime." Disrupt the system. That's my thing. I'm like, go for it.
Right. I think there's
be queer and fuck it all up.
There's so many parallels I see, at least with, I guess in general, it's any counterculture kind of thing. Like I said, in punk rock, growing up in punk rock and hardcore, just because that's the experience that I have, that I try and relate to, is that I see so many parallels between just that kind of the attitude and the fuck the system, destroy the system, break the system, change the system, fight against, everything that I feel is wrong with society. But yeah, it's just so amazing. I'm so curious to see, every year it just seems like there's, of course it's like a couple steps forward, one step back. In certain parts of the country, they try, and anytime there's a push forward, they try and pull back as hard as possible, against, and do things like that. I'm so anxious to see where all that goes. And before I totally get myself canceled by anybody, or hopefully not, I'll try and bring it back to the artwork and the design, because I want to know, because I mentioned earlier, I don't know what the first time that somebody reached out to you and said, hey, we'd like to use the flag for something, right? Like I said, I know I saw it on Spotify.
Uh-oh. I think I lost you. Well, now that this show is mine.
Oh, well, I can hear you fine.
Oh, okay, now you're back. You froze for like a good 10 seconds there.
Yeah, I did one of these, kind of thing. But no, I just wanted to know, like, with what some of the first times you had, the first thing that somebody really reached out where you started to see your design starting to enter into the public more, because you made some pins, right, and flags that you had done, and you were doing that back in 2018 after you made it, and you saw that response where you're like, oh, well, let me just make some stuff with it, right? And so you started kind of with your own merch store selling products with the flag, right?
Yeah.
And then how did it come about that did Spotify reach out to you and say, hey, we'd really love to use this flag that you created for a play, for playlists or whatever? Like, what was kind of your first exposure of, all of a sudden these corporate companies are like, we're interested in using this, we're interested in using that.
Yeah. I had people from the corporate world reaching out. I think it started like in 2020 was when it kind of really started to be a thing. And the kind of general consensus I got from those entities was like, they were recognizing it as like the new standard, I guess. It's not something that I necessarily ever said it was, but like they were viewing it as such, like this is now the thing. And so they wanted to include it in whatever they were doing. And it put me in a really interesting, unique position to be able to be like, yeah, I'm cool with that, or no, I'm not cool with that. And you need to give back to the community or do something more because, like I'm like anti-capitalist living in a capitalist society, like I understand that capitalism is kind of terrible, but I also live within capitalism and have to survive. And so by having these companies and stuff reach out to me and actually value my input kind of puts me in this really interesting position where I can kind of dictate how capitalism functions utilizing my design, because I can say, like, I'm cool with that, but you really need to like give money back or do something for the community. Because a lot of times companies just want to do what we call pink washing or rainbow capitalism, where they'll just slap rainbows on everything in June, and then once July hits, it's all gone. They don't care about us anymore for a year. And so if I get a company that's like that, I'm like, yeah, sure, okay, you can use it, but you're going to pay for it, and you're going to donate money, or you're going to do something substantial for the community, or else I'm just going to tell you, no, I don't want you to use it.
It's such a shame. Rainbow capitalism is such a good term. Like, I feel like that needs to be a positive term, and you used it like a negative one. I wish it was a more positive term, because I like rainbow capitalism. I feel like that should be a powerful thing. Does it get used in a
honestly,
positive sense?
to me, no. But honestly, if there was a positive spin to it, it would be like rainbow capitalism is the capitalism where gay people are in control of everything.
So
who runs the capitalistic society? Everyone within the queer community.
Yeah. Have you had companies reach out that you just said no, or companies reach out that you absolutely do not want to, I don't want to say like identify with or have any kind of relation to in any way?
I've had a couple.
You don't have to name them.
Not anything super specific. Yeah, no, not anything super specific. I did have, Portland has a history of police wanting to be a part of Pride and like the Pride Parade and stuff, and a lot of the community being like against that. And I had I had one of the precincts ask me if they could make like T-shirts with my flag on it for them to march in the parade with, and I was like, well, given the circumstances of how a good chunk of the community feels about having police at Pride, I think I'd rather you not.
Yeah.
And they never responded, and they also weren't there, so who knows? But you know, really, no companies have been really that bad. It's usually if somebody is just like clearly their intent is not not good, or not something that's like they're just doing it because they want to be part of the gay pie.
Right. That's what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I'll be a little more critical there, and a little more hard to work with, just because I'm like, hey, if you want to use it, I'm not going to make it easy, because I know that you're not using it for the right reasons necessarily.
Right. And you've had some things, and I don't know which stuff you're allowed to talk about, not talk about. And, again, not talking like any kind of finances stuff, but there's been some companies I've seen some pairings come out with. I think you were showing some socks, right? And I saw my family has stuff that was from Target, and I think we talked about a little bit, just like going to the store and seeing the flag.
It's wild. It is wild.
In Target, it's just such
yeah.
I'm glad it was Target and not Walmart, but
yeah, definitely.
But it was crazy. I don't know if you'd sent the link, or one of my friends sent a link and said, "Oh, holy shit, did you see this?" I think it was even something crazy like our puppy has tennis balls with the flag on it, even, and a bow tie, I think, and some stuff like that. And
my cat has the bow tie on right now.
So I mean, with kind of coming through, I don't know. It's just so wild to me. Again, like I said, every time I think about it, and I think about, this is just fucking nuts. But it makes me excited for you. It makes me excited to see, not only for you, but in general, if these big companies that are hopefully not just, doing the rainbow capitalism are trying to put stuff out. It's helping to, again, I hate to use the word normalize, but bring acceptance of, like, there's nothing to be fighting against. There's nothing odd about this. There's nothing to be, taboo necessarily anymore. And it helps bring that acceptance. And that's part of the excitement too, outside of, again, just for you thinking, I get excited for you when I see that stuff too. But how do some of those things come about? Because, in like a licensing kind of a sense, or however it works out, what happens when Target reaches out to you? Because somebody from there actually reached out to you, or are these companies just using it and you don't hear about it, or how does that happen?
More often than not, we've actually they reach out to us, which is really cool. I think very, very rarely have we had to. I mean, there are cases of random companies who use it, and we're pretty lax on it. Like, we're not like, my assistant and the rest of the team are not really super gung ho about wasting so much of our time running after every little company that decides to use it without asking. But honestly, corporate level people, or even larger business level people, have been super on it, where they're just we know that you're the person, and we're going to contact you directly and see what you think and how you feel about this and how you want to be involved. And two, for me, it's really interesting because I feel like it's given me an opportunity to kind of mess with the corporate system a little bit in a way, because always when you're talking with a corporate company about use of something that you've done or whatever, and there's always some really robust agreement involved, and has all these stuff in it that's written that I don't understand what any of it means. Which is why I have a lawyer. But it's interesting to me because I I've had the opportunity to be able to be in a position where like a company will be like, here's our agreement and these things we won't change because that's just our regular agreement. And then I come back and I'm like, well, I don't like this, or this or this. So if you want to talk to me about using the flag, I really need this to change. And they and they do, which is weird because I'm like, you're a corporate company who just told me you won't change this thing, and you just did. So I'm kind of like, how much of that is true, like, like we've talked about before, where like not always, but a good, amount of these larger companies, they want to get as much out of you as they can and give you back as little as possible. And so I try to make sure that, the level of integrity is always there and always high, and that, it's a fair trade. Because with a lot of these companies, like what they're wanting to do in response to the use is often just a drop in the bucket of who they are and what they are as a company. So for me to push back and say you need to do more, you need to do better, is like honestly really me not asking for much. So like just do it.
And it's your way of waving it, giving them the finger back a little bit, like said, and saying, no, this isn't okay with me. And as a creator, as an artist, it makes me happy to see that some of these companies are respecting you as a creator and approaching you, because I think any artist out there, if you created something and then that creation did enter into the public lexicon and became this thing, you're still the creator, and you're still the artist that created this thing. And small artists all the time, they see something get, knocked off on Wish or whatever it is, and they get really upset. Oh, I could do this, blah, 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 blah. And they might be the same people that send artwork that's not theirs, later, and sometimes don't put it together, because when something gets so big, all of a sudden, that doesn't mean that it belongs to the public in general. It's just because it's part of pop culture at this point doesn't mean that somebody didn't create that. So it makes me happy to see that these companies are, for the most part, actually reaching out to you, and it does give you a chance to have a say in something and say, no, the way you want to use that does not align with my values or what I believe or what I think how it should be used. And that they are actually listening. Like I said, they're sending these robust contracts that they probably are basically usually the same for their vendors or whatever. And you're pushing back and saying nope, and they're actually listening, sometimes and making changes to respect what you did. And I think that's really, really incredibly valuable to see that as an artist that you're being treated that way. So, like I said, I don't want to go like too into all that kind of stuff. But I think it's really cool on a personal level. I'm really proud of you when I see that stuff. And I think it's amazing. And I can't fathom having a creation get to that level of acceptance. And then another thing I want to talk to you, because you are an artist, is that you do music as well. Because I liked your last album, and so I want to hear a little bit about the record and with what you're doing. And because I don't know how to describe the music outside of being electronic, but you just put out an album this past year.
I know you can still hear me.
So you talk about a little bit about that.
You'll be back in a second. I know it. You always come back.
Oh man, I think I lost you.
Hi, welcome back.
Oh, yeah. Well, thankfully, we had the fun internet experience of somebody using a jackhammer either in my yard or next door. So that was fun. I think it's right when I decided to ask you about music that everything
Yeah,
just fell
that's
apart.
usually how it works.
My yard
Yeah.
got hit by waves. My internet got hit by waves, I think they would say. Is that a good tie-in? So, all right. So let's
Yeah, I
talk about
guess
it
so.
because you put out a couple albums and doing solo music, and I think it's super rad. And this past year, you put out Waves, which is on Spotify. So go look up, and you have it listed under Daniel Quasar.
Yeah.
Okay, so go
And you can
on.
find me on Bandcamp as well if you want like physical copies and fun stuff like that.
Well, I do want to talk about because you released a double LP, which is insane. And the process of that as a creator and creating some kind of crazy merch and dream thing. I always wanted to make vinyl for one of my old bands, and it never happened. And I remember when you told me you were going to make vinyl, I just super jealous. And hearing about the process was interesting, but definitely jealous about making vinyl. So I wanted to talk about your music that you do, and I want to hear more about that. And like I said, you sent me the record. I really dig it, and people should go check it out. So talk to me about your music.
Well, I make electronic music. If I were to, oh man, there's a really great explanation. So a friend of mine reviewed my recent album for me, and he gave like a really good, really interesting, like way to explain it as far as so I'll just read it to you because I love the way he described it, because this is the way he ended the review. He was like, French electronica, German industrial, Japanese pop, British ambient, and American nu metal combine here into an album which fans of each will find various things to enjoy. And that's no easy task to balance. So I was like, well, I basically was like, so essentially I just took bits and pieces of genres from all over the world and fuse them all together, I guess.
That sounds pretty good to me. And this is a solo thing that you're doing all the music, or you're recording at home. What do you?
Yeah, I do everything myself. I compose all the music. I do all the lyrics. Most of the sound engineering I do, but a friend of mine in Arkansas does more sound engineering and then masters it for me, because I reach a wall at a certain point where I can't get it to sound, radio ready, kind of like good. I can get it to sound pretty good, but he makes it all sound better. So
You do your vocals at home, or do you usually go into the studio to do that?
I do. That's why I have this $400 microphone, so I can record them those fancy, completely processed vocals that went through the blender.
Little did you know you could have bought a $10 mic and just put auto tune on it. It would have been fine.
I used to. My first album actually, my first album has a track on it where I literally recorded my vocals on my phone, because they originally was just me doing like a quick, because I hadn't recorded vocals for that track yet, but I wanted to send something like just a dirty demo to a friend, so they could hear it for a show that I was going to be a part of. And so I recorded them on my phone and I slapped them into the track just so I could send that. And then I ended up using those vocals with a bunch of effects. And I guess with the way that the effects interacted with the phone quality of recording, it made this really interesting sound. So I just kept it. So
have you
there?
Have you played gigs with doing your music, or is it mostly a home project? Put out some records, put out some songs, or obviously you just did an album. So are you putting together albums as opposed to I just wrote a song. Let me toss it up on Bandcamp and Spotify, you know?
When I started music in like 2006, I did a couple of like gigs and things like that because I didn't really have we didn't really have the options for digital distribution and things like that. And even making like CDs on an independent level was really hard back then too. Besides, you know, doing a burn CD and putting it out like that, but I'm too much of a perfectionist to do a burn CD. I'm not punk enough for that.
Right, yeah.
And that was fun, but also in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, I was terrible back then, and I thought I was like the shit.
That's every musician.
But like, but now like I want to do some gigs, but it's hard because there's too much anxiety involved with stage and stuff like that. But I'm trying to come up with this, and especially with the pandemic, I'm trying to come up with doing some kind of like digital concerts, something that I can do online, probably on like Twitch or whatever. I mean, it's limiting, unfortunately, because with where I'm at as an independent musician, like the covers that I've made, I can't perform them online because I'm not going to pay for the licensing to do that. You know, like if you go to a venue, that's already on the venue. If you do covers, they pay for that. Like you don't have to worry about it. But online, it's a whole different world. You have to set up a whole different set of licensing and things for that. And I don't want to go through that effort and spend that money when I'm not sure if I'm going to recoup it or not. So I'll just do all the original stuff instead.
I tried before. I'm trying to think when I did my little electronic record. It was maybe 2003 or 2000, somewhere around there. And I tried playing a couple gigs, and it was me and my drum machine where I had everything programmed into it, set up. And I thought, what the hell am I supposed to do? I was singing, but at the same point I thought, and I was playing kind of with like punk and hardcore show kind of stuff. And so I got some strobe lights that would hook up and kind of move with the bass a little bit. And I thought, oh yeah, it's totally going to be enough. It's pretty challenging. Just as one person up there, I felt like I needed some cardboard cutouts or something that were people that could have faked like they were playing. Like I had a whole band that was going, and really it was just all running through the drum machine. It was definitely an interesting experience. I was just playing some gigs for fun and just did a record just for good, because I bought a drum machine and then thought, oh, this is cool. Let me try and figure out and imagine that I sound like Kraftwerk when I don't sound anything like Kraftwerk. You know, it was one of those good things.
I've been told that I am Kraftwerk-esque, which is like pretty cool. I mean, I'm not mad about a reference like that.
yeah. Anytime that was my Kraftwerk, I was in such a heavy Kraftwerk phase. Even my daughter, her first concert technically was Kraftwerk. For whatever ungodly reason, they came through and played in Phoenix, and my wife was pregnant, but she had developed her ears at that point. So I'm considering that her first concert is seeing Kraftwerk in 3D.
Oh, yeah.
Although she missed the 3D element, but I have a feeling that just in the belly, she was picking up just all the thumping bass and everything that was happening. Plus, I wish my first concert had been something that cool. Instead, it was like Lollapalooza 1994, 3 or something like that. I don't know. It was like the Beastie Boys.
My first concert was a Britney Spears concert.
Was it pretty good?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was in high school. I was into it. Up in the nosebleed, 300 level seats. I didn't even care. Just this teeny tiny little dancing figure way down there. But I was all about it.
Don't care. See, they know how to do it. Lip syncing, generally. But I understand for dance moves, but you have to have a whole stage production. So I think if you're going to do the electronic shows, you need to get 12 to 15 dancers, full stage production, and just go for it, you know?
This is why I have projection mapping and stuff like that, so I can take care of all that. I've got a plan. I just need to put it all together.
Would you do some kind of a video element behind you while you're playing? Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen.
I bought this system called Lightform that uses a hefty webcam that you connect to your projector. That you point your projector at whatever surfaces that you're working with, and it will spit out a bunch of patterns in like 30 seconds. It'll spit out a bunch of patterns, and the webcam will read it, and then on on your computer, it will show like depth information.
Oh.
And like sections and stuff like that. So you can put. So like you don't have to like. So it makes projection mapping easier to where you don't have to sit there and try to map things around stuff. It will figure all that out for you, and then you just put like drag and drop elements onto it.
What was that called?
It makes projection mapping really easy. It's called Lightform.
Okay, to check it out. Not that I plan it. And
it's
that
all
would
one
be
word.
If you were doing a home gig kind of scenario, you could use it for that. Okay,
I could probably do that out somewhere else too. I mean, I can't imagine because of how fast it is able to read a venue, like able to read surfaces. Like you could easily, like most venues will let you in super early. So if you wanted to sit there and spend an hour or two programming your show at a new venue, you totally could really easily.
That would be so crazy. I know. Kraftwerk had a big video thing going the whole time, and the couple times I've seen Devo, they've had video stuff going. The downside is if you go see them like 2 shows on a tour, it's the exact same show because the video is already set. It's like, this is the set list. This is what we're playing. This is what we're playing tomorrow. And it's going to be in the exact same order, which is fine, but you decide to put out a double LP doing vinyl, and that's an interesting endeavor. What made you decide, hey, instead of doing something digital, I also want to do a physical copy and do something as extensive as vinyl and even a double LP?
I've always wanted to. Every single one of my albums has had some physical element release with it, and it's always been like something that I've always like dreamed of doing. Like my first album was like, here's the CD in a jewel case with cardboard sleeve over it, like something you would go to a Tower Records and buy kind of thing. And so that was like I want the like completely traditional like musician thing. And obviously, I mean, I didn't go super traditional because I have like, it was in a jewel case that had clear film for all the inserts. So like you could literally look through it and the words, like I had this whole design where like the words were on separate, like the track list was a circle, but each page had a different track on it. So when they were all on top of each other, it made the full circle, and then the CD had the title on it. So when they were on top of the CD, it completed the circle, and like the tray card is clear, and all that jazz. And it had a sleeve, so it wouldn't just be like this completely clear jewel case on a shelf kind of thing. And the second album was kind of my first try into vinyl, but it was lathe cut vinyl. Which was fine, but, it just it didn't quite work. It didn't sound quite as good as I wanted it to. And so the third album was when I discovered, A to Z Media, which is that company that's local, but also in New York and London. That their whole thing is like, we want to give people the high budget, high quantity treatment, but at lower budgets and lower quantities. So I was like, when I talked to them, they were like, yeah, we can do 250 copies of your double LP that's got like this fancy colored vinyl and silver cardboard and stuff like that, and it's only going to cost you $6,000.
Yeah.
So instead of having to order 10,000 copies, I'm only ordering 250.
Right, but you get to do all the fun stuff that you really wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
Like all the design
Oh,
stuff.
yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
like really
totally.
the design is kind of part of the draw a little bit based off of you explaining the CD.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I'm all about the packaging. Like my thing is like I want the whole experience. Like I want from the moment that you get it and you tear the plastic off to opening it and seeing every element, like all of that is important to me, not just the music. The music obviously is the most important part, but every element is important. And and it just, it was really fun. And also too, like it was so much fun just to hear my stuff on vinyl and it sounds so good. Like because it's real vinyl. It's not cut, it's actually pressed, and it just sounds so pristine. Like we worked so hard on it. My sound engineer did some amazing work on it, and I'm just so proud of it. And also too, like the double LP thing worked with the concept of the album, which is that the album was split into 4 parts, so 3 tracks in 4 parts, kind of thing. And each side, because it's cut, it's recorded at 45 RPM, so which is already a higher quality sound, but that's just enough time to have 3 tracks on each side. So it all fell into place really nicely for the concept of the album.
And were those 10 inches or 12 inches?
They're 12 inches.
12 inches, okay. Yeah. I think one of the only double LPs I had, it was similar, that was just a full-length album they'd done, I think at 45 RPM, like put on a double 10-inch. That was always a dream of mine, was to do vinyl. It's just, back in the day, I really wanted my band to have a 7-inch. I don't know what it was, just because of going shopping, the idea of having a 7-inch and a song or 1 or 2 songs on each side, I thought there is nothing fucking cooler than doing that. Maybe I'll have to put out album.
Yeah, you should. I'm looking at doing a 7-inch when I get around to releasing new stuff, just because I really want that kind of like 45 thing. Small hole, because nobody uses adapters anymore.
Nobody does.
But like I was talking to my rep with the vinyl company, and he's like, I guess like most things, because of the pandemic, everything is super like pushed back, and he was like, you really have to think a year in advance now.
Oh my gosh.
Like when we were talking about it before, it was like 6 months in advance. Well, now it's almost a whole year.
Wow.
That they're backed up that far, and I'm just like, oh, ouch, that's terrifying.
That's
like,
crazy for planning. For planning a record release. At this point, I guess you kind of have to do the release and then start the vinyl, get the mix done, get the vinyl going, and then maybe the release is 6 months out, and then
vinyl
another
has to become a secondary thing. Like it can't be unless you already know, like unless you're already established and you already know that things are going to go really well with a physical release at the same time as your new album. You have to kind of, as an independent artist, think about it in the sense of like, I'm gonna put out the record digitally and then drum up like further success for it by saying, oh, now we're going to put out a vinyl, but you have to pre-order it. It's like a campaign thing or whatever,
It's so crazy. I mean, even we think about a traditional band too. If you put a year into the record, maybe, getting everything ready, and then another year potentially of waiting for vinyl, and you're at this 2-year cycle kind of, and most bands can't just get by on saying, well, we'll just wait to put this record out for another year. We'll just keep touring off the other stuff.
Exactly.
No big deal. Everybody wants to hear the last record or whatever. That works for some bands, of course, but
yeah,
that's so crazy that it's an entire year. But I think it's such a cool thing to have done. And again, with the design element, the idea of designing for that just sounds kind of like a dream. It
was a lot of fun.
Back in the day, I used to handle, I guess, the graphic design stuff of our band's things. And I remember our band's first cassette, I printed on an offset press in my graphic design class. but it was so DIY and punk, I had to do that myself. And then another band CD, went to Kinko's, used one of those like messed up Kinko's cards that was loaded, made all the copies, and then was home like folding all the inserts and stuff because that makes it more of an experience, I guess, for the person paying $4 for it. But it was a good time, So are you still, when you're making music, are you just kind of recording stuff here or there? Do you sit down? Do you have a process are you compiling things and then when it's time to do a record, or do you like to write and then decide, all right, I'm going to sit down and start recording this album as a whole?
I kind of just, for me, it's all piecemeal. Like, I might come up with something now. Like, when I put out my first album, like, I had new stuff coming up immediately. Like, before I was even, like, when I was pressing when I was prepping the first album for release and getting its CD, like, made and everything like that, I was already making a new track. And then I was like, well, I really like this new track. Should I put out a deluxe version? Like, what do I do here? But no, and it's kind of shifted over the years too. Like, now I'm like, for instance, with the current album, like, I'm not really, I'm working on some stuff, but I haven't like actively like really gone gung-ho with it because I'm like, I don't want to completely move away from what I currently put out because it hasn't been given the life yet to kind of like live and be and do and be successful. And I don't want to move on because I still have all these vinyl to push out, like, I need to recoup some of that. But, I've come up with other ways to kind of get around that. I have, I might be putting out a thing as a different artist name. It's a way to get stuff out there without taking away from the other
current
stuff.
release. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just because you can't stop the creative process. You kind of it happens as it happens, and I'm not gonna like. I've been there where like I came up with something and it's like super late and I'm just about to go to bed when normally I would get up and start like doing something. But sometimes I'll just be like, whatever, I'll just let it, I'll go to sleep, I'll remember it. And then tomorrow I'll be like, what was that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But it's honestly, a lot of times with music, it's completely random. I almost never can just be like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to make a track. No, that never happens.
Just something hits, you like lay something down.
Sometimes, but almost never.
Yeah, I've tried.
Only time that ever really happens is if like, because like some of the better tracks that I've made is because I've randomly, like a melody has randomly come into my head, and I'm like, that seems cool, and then I'll go and quickly get it down into my music program, and then either then I'll mess around with it until I come up with something, or I'll come back to it later or whatever. I try not to force it, because whenever I try to force it, I just get really frustrated, and then I go, I don't want to play music anymore.
Of course. Yeah, I'm a big fan of when something hits, just throwing down even some rough version of it, because I'm going to forget it. And I have gotten in the habit over the years of if I'm just playing guitar and jamming things and just messing around and something kind of hits right, even before having a phone that you could just kind of record it for a minute, just scribble down what the chords were real quick again in some sort of way that I'll remember, that I'm like, this is a D over C, whatever, write it down. I'll still forget it next time anyway, probably, but when those moments
I have a lot
strike.
of videos of my carpet where you can hear me singing random melodic lines.
The carpet
I'm just like walking
yeah.
around with, where I'm just sitting here like blah 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 blah, and it's just like video recording my feet on the carpet.
You can do audio recordings on your phone too. I mean, I'm sure the carpet adds an extra element.
I could, but like, Android doesn't really have a like built-in audio recording app.
Oh,
You have to
okay.
like, or at least not a good one. So you have to download something, and it's just easier for me to double tap one of the side buttons and open up the camera and hit
That makes
record.
sense. Yeah. So the last thing I want to kind of hit on, right, as we jumped back in after getting cut off, is you showed me probably as somebody that grew up on comic books, something that's incredibly rad, and that was a pairing that you just did with DC Comics, which
Yeah.
crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Do you mind? And I know you're a video game and comic book person. That's not so. DC did kind of a Pride collection. Was it new story? Do you know if it was
Yeah.
new stories or?
No, so this is all like bits of different comic issues that are all like have some kind of like gay theme to them or LGBTQ theme to them, and they reached out to me to utilize. Let me see if I can make this not look like trash for a second.
Oh
There's the
man,
focus.
that's so
Just wanted to
wild.
kind of like, I know it's so crazy. And then this is the anthology, the like collection
All of them together.
of like a bunch
Yeah.
of different. Yeah, totally. But yeah. So yeah, that was a really fun project. We're gonna see a really weird version of me for a second while I zoom in on my face. There we go.
You got to get the close up of the
Hi.
eyes. Yeah.
I know, right?
So did
That was a
DC
really
reached
cool
out to
one.
you?
Like, yeah, they reached out to me, and I was just like, "Yes, whatever you want. Yes, yes, please. Can I be friends with you afterwards,
Of course.
please?
Has DC had story
Can
like
this door stay open?"
right? Yeah. Let's keep the line of communication open. Has DC had kind of previous gay characters or things that have come up, or is that a newer thing? I
Um,
mean, there's always I hate to say the joke about
well, I
Robin in a
mean,
sense, but
yeah, I mean, Batman and Robin are kind of like totally gay.
yeah,
Let's be real.
it
I
seems
mean,
obvious.
Batman has a butler. There's no women in his life. It's
Fair.
him and two men in his own house with a big cave, and he likes to wear tights. I mean, come on.
Yeah, there's a lot of stereotypical science there. Yeah, yeah. If you want to put him
Yeah,
into a
yeah,
box,
yeah.
Daniel, that's fine. But
I will put Batman in a box. I have no problem with that. But they more lately have there been more not just queer coded but very actual queer characters being added into comic books and media and stuff like that. So that's kind of like what this is about. And yeah, yeah.
that's so cool, and it's cool to see too. Even sometimes, as wild as it is, Disney dipping a toe in a little bit. Our favorite, what Gaston's friend was in the real life, whatever adaptation of it was. I don't know if
Oh, the live action, yeah.
yeah, live action was like I don't know if he was implied gay or whatever it was, but it's crazy that wasn't even that long ago, and I feel like there was still some kind of a Disney backlash a little bit, but at least taking a step and
Yeah.
just my personal feelings, but it felt like Elsa. I don't know if you watch Frozen, but might have a thing with was it Honey Marin or whatever. I got a 4-year-old, so I see a lot of Disney at this point, but little, that wasn't out or obvious thing, but it's interesting to see these major companies starting to sometimes a little bit too slow, maybe, especially somebody like a Disney
Yeah.
to embrace, but at least starting to lean a little bit that way or do things, or DC to be like, we've got a queer or gay character, or different
Yeah.
storylines and have that out front, and to do that series of the covers and the collections. I mean, that's to talk about the weird dream pairings. It's one thing you pair with one company and maybe they're a big company and that's cool, but there's the things like DC or the stuff that you grow up with. It's really the proud moments in your heart that you just get to really experience. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. It's all wild to me.
And those are out, I assume, in like comic book stores right now that people can go out and pick up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole series of Pride issues that came out all throughout June, and I think they're all out at this point because all of the ones that I had on order at my local shop were all there when I picked them up. But yeah, I think there's like 8 or 9 different issues that are all part of this like Pride collection. And there will be more. I think they also introduced a new series in the like as part of this collection, so that's going to continue afterwards. Go to your local comic shop and buy some gay comics.
Yeah, it's just like I said, it's so crazy. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and hanging out and doing this chat with me on video and going over it. And I appreciate you as a friend, and I appreciate you, and I'm proud of you for the work and the stuff that you're doing and what your flag is accomplishing, and how your little design is just blown up is I don't know. I'm really proud of you, and I appreciate it. And I just wanted to say I appreciate you and thank you for doing this with me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and that means a lot, and I'm glad you brought me on here. It was fun.
Well, sometimes the pin daddy has to bring on some friends, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So where's the best place for everybody to find you online?
Besides everywhere,
what do you go by? Do you have handles, or you just?
Oh yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram, but my handle for just about everywhere is Daniel Quasar, just one word. I recently just started getting into TikTok because I want to be cool with the kids.
Of course, yeah.
But Daniel Quasar is, I had made an account like a year and a half ago, and now I can't get it into it, so I had to go with Quasar Daniel instead.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so
that's
for the kids,
that's my account there.
Okay. And what do you do on TikTok?
And I'm actually getting some traction there. Well, I wasn't really doing... I was trying to use it as like a thing to push my music, but that didn't really do anything. And then when Pride came around, people were like starting to talk about me specifically and my design. So I was like, well, this might be a good opportunity to hop in and kind of be part of the conversation. So when I started... reacting to some of their videos and stuff, people were like, oh my gosh, you're on TikTok. And I was like, yeah, oh my God, I am. And so they started tagging me, and now I have like 500 followers on TikTok, just wanting to hear me ramble on about flag stuff and other gay things.
Like you don't talk about video games and streaming and stuff?
I mean, I will eventually.
Yeah, you got to get them in
I'll
first,
have to branch out because I gotta like hook them in, and then and then let the weird come out after that.
Right. Awesome. Well, Daniel, I really appreciate it, and everybody go check out Daniel's music, and of course the flag, and check out his store if you want to get some really high quality, awesome flags for your house, and of course follow him on TikTok, or follow Daniel on TikTok. I said him again. I'm doing it again.
You start it, and that way you're going to end it that way.
I had to bookend it with messing up pronouns, because that's just what I do. But you know that I come from a good place in my heart, that it's of not intentionally doing anything. So fun times. All right, Daniel, I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
All right, see you. Bye.
Creative Labs by Alchemy, with your host, Greg Kerr. Are you interested in making enamel pins, washi tape, patches, acrylic keychains, and more? Get in touch and create with us at alchemymerch.com.